We're back, and we're going to talk about sustainability. With me is David Stark, the president of Holganix. David, welcome to the Eye.
Thank you, Phil. Glad to be here.
So a lot of things have changed about sustainability in your career, as you've seen probably over the past 20 years. Give us a lay of the land from a grower standpoint. What are they looking for when it comes to sustainability? And what is the industry as a whole looking for as well?
So it's interesting that you say, my perspective, and you and I go back a number of years, and there was a time when sustainability was more about marketing and brand positioning.
Absolutely.
And there wasn't a whole lot that was real behind it. But there's been a shift, in my opinion, and I think you would agree too, where sustainability is required to go forward to continue to do business because consumers are demanding it and they always will. And I'm glad. From a grower perspective though, they get squeezed, I think, the most in the whole supply chain because from a food standpoint, the biggest environmental impact is on the farm.
Right.
It's not in the kitchen, it's not in the store. But farmers work in a global economy, so any cost they incur to produce more using less has to keep them profitable, because if they think they're going to charge more for their product in a commodity system that's global, they're really going to struggle.
Right.
And so they're looking for tools that enable them to do what they want to do on their land, but also stay in business.
And some of those tools, as we walk around the Potato Expo, I'm seeing a lot of new technologies, whether it's smart vehicles from John Deere that can calculate certain things, or sensors in the ground and so on. With your background in agriculture, what do you think are the ones that make sense versus some of the ones that are, might up somebody's stock price, but that's about it?
Okay, well, it's interesting you bring up the smart vehicles and the precision agriculture. I think there's a lot of promise there to only put the input in where it's needed and not where it's not. What growers tell me that they struggle with is there's too much data. And the data is great to know, but it's not immediately actionable. What do I do now with the data that helps me make the proper intervention so I produce a better crop at the end and I'm more profitable? And I think that's where that whole industry and machinery and data needs to go, is enable real-time changes, because that's going to impact sustainability.
So you bring up a real interesting point to me that, people who are in farming are not data geeks.
Right.
And you have all these machines that do all this stuff and you can get all this data, but it might be talking a different language.
Yes.
To what that farmer really needs. So they look at all the data. Are they getting frustrated? Or are they saying this is great, but now they've got to hire somebody to figure out what to do with it?
Exactly. In the different platforms. So what I didn't add that you just alluded to is they have a lot of different data that doesn't talk to each other. So how do you make it cohesive without being abused because someone else claims ownership of the data, which of course is a sensitive point, as it should be.
Of course.
So this is an area that I think will turn out in the right place in the end, but it's going through its growing pains. And it'll be interesting to see where we all end up on it.
Let me throw another aspect to this whole thing. When it comes to climate change, obviously we've seen, in California where I live, the droughts, the fires, having a huge impact on agriculture. But globally, we're seeing more rains, more tornadoes, more heat spells, and so on. How do we then, at the farmer level, deal with all that? Do we have to, move our farms? I know that there's some farms that have moved out of California to either Peru or to Mexico because of the climate. Are we going to see more of that change happening?
I hope not, but we may. So for the large acre row crops like corn and soy, there's so much genetic capability that there will be varieties that will be suited for that grower's farm, I think, no matter what. It's the specialty crops that I think, as someone who likes to eat food, that I worry more about, because there's not the investment behind it, so there's not the toolbox. And so how do we move production for things that are highly specialized? I'm not sure potato is going to be one of those, because potato already is widely adopted geographically. Every country virtually on earth grows potatoes.
And one of the things that I've heard is that, in particular, the EU are growing more potatoes, and China is starting to grow more potatoes. So are we at risk at the U.S. potato supply, because now we might get cheaper imports from China? And depending on what happens with NAFTA, do we see China and maybe the EU starting to sell lots of potatoes to Mexico because they put a tariff on U.S. potatoes?
Well, I hope not, but all those things are risks. What is in North America and the U.S. in particular's favor is quality. And if there's going to be a sustainable potato, it's going to be on a farm here where the growers are incredibly talented and knowledgeable about what they do. And there's money behind putting the tools in place for U.S. potatoes. So I think the U.S. potato market will stay competitive, but needs to stay hungry and always changing. If you're static in any business, and I know you preach this, including agriculture, then there's someone else out there that's going to put you out of business.
And that's why we need people like you heading up our ag businesses. So David, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Phil Lempert. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more at the Eye at the 2018 Potato Expo.